Life's last gleaming, baseball stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. For the ramparts we watched were so gallantly screened, and the rockets' red flare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, sing us that star-spangled banner, yeah, yeah. For the land and the free, and the home of the brave. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with our invocation, Dr. Michael Freed.
Good afternoon. Right. Let's go to God in prayer. Lord, we come to your throne, Father, this afternoon with humble hearts, thanking you, God, for grace and mercy. We ask you, God, to pray for the families been affected by the hurricanes. Bless Florida, the Carolinas, be with them, Father, those that lost loved ones. We ask you, God, as a club here, we can be there to assist them. Ask you, God, again, to bless every club member here. And we ask you, God, to bless the president and the district governors and all. Let us go out, Father, do your work together. And God, continue just to store all the blessings that we have. And God, keep us humble, Lord, seeking to do your will. These are the blessings, Son, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Terry Duffy, family of Rotary.
Thank you, near President Judge Chapman. Maybe Greg will be well soon. Let's wish some happy birthdays today. Les Pinkert on October the 5th, and a pair on October the 7th, Margaret Boot and Paul Lee. Les Moreland, October the 9th. Anniversary wishes going out to Bill Durden and Jody on October the 4th, Kelly Pilot and Daryl on October the 7th, Greg Gregory and Vicky on October the 13th, and a pair of anniversary wishes for Willis Smitherman and Lana, and Jenny Logan and Tim on October the 15th. Hope you all have a fantastic week. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Catherine Melee is going to come forward and introduce our guests and visiting Rotarians today.
Hello, we are happy to welcome our guests and visiting Rotarians today. We have one, so when I call your name, would you please stand and remain standing and co-recognize? Our guest is Alan Register, guest of Mike Azar. Thank you for coming today and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Catherine. And can't ask Lawrence Johnson to please come forward. 1,004 points. And the last four numbers, 7289. 7289. Right. Seven of diamonds. All right, a few announcements today. The Dothan Rotary Children's Foundation Board will meet at the piano following this meeting, meet with Adam Hall. Also, the membership committee, we will meet next door following this meeting. And Kelly Pilot, will you please come forward? She has an announcement.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, Blake warned you last week that I would be up here talking to you about the purple pinky donuts, so that's what I'm doing. So, all right, so just go ahead and be honest. How many of you are planning to buy today? Okay, I'm gonna have to stand here a really long time because we gotta have some more hands than that. How many of you are planning on buying some today? That is so much better. Okay, I won't do it a third time, but I know there's more of you out there, right? Arkansas? Okay, our goal is 533 boxes. So far, we have sold 386. So we don't have that far to go. However, we still need 147. So just remember that $25 per box. And where did Blake go? Blake, he stepped outside. Okay, tell us again, what's the amount if we give on the 25? What goes to polio? You didn't write that on my card.
It's $185 a month.
187, 145, something like that. But we need.
We donate $100,000.
There you go. That's what we need to know. We give $100,000 if we purchase 533 boxes. So please fill out the sheet. Get the check, credit card. Blake has the square that you can charge those, or debit card, whatever you want to do. But we need you. Please come through for us, and please let's get that 147. And we can go over and above that. It's okay. But please see us before you leave. Okay? Thank you.
Question?
One other thing, Bruce and I had the opportunity to hear the owner of the Dunkin' Donuts in Chattanooga last Saturday. And he told about the first time he started the project, he thought it was such a great idea. He sold $20 worth of donuts that day. And then last year they raised close to $1 million. So that's how far it's come. But also when Tim and I were walking down to have dinner with a group of the district governors, I met a guy that was from Tennessee, and he asked me where I was from. And I told him I was from Dothan. He said, y'all do the purple pinky, don't you? And I said, yeah. He said, we do not like y'all in our club. Y'all have beat us every year since you've gotten into that. We used to be the winner. So anyway, he told Bruce that too.
Threatened you too, didn't
Yeah, he threatened me. Yeah.
Sounds like a challenge is needed.
Yeah.
Good deal. Thank you, Kelly. Andy Goslin and Rick Riker, will y'all please come forward?
Rick and I are very honored today to be part of something very meaningful. We're going to recognize today someone that's very special that we all know and love very well. Myself and many others consider this person very hardworking, loyal, very, very dependable, and very passionate. He was born here in Dothan, lived his whole life here in Dothan. He's making a big impact on our club, our community. He's got a deep passion for young people, a passion for fishing, a passion for his family, and just about anything he gets involved with. He has a beautiful wife of 31 years. That's his greatest life choice, I think. He's got loving children, a recent grandson, and the person we're going to recognize today is Philip Gilly. So Philip, if you would come forward. Philip, also today, I'd like your wife, Beth, to come forward. Your son, Grant, Mama, and Andrew, your son-in-law. Rick's going to have a few things to share also.
I could read a book about Philip, and known him for a good while. He's been the leader for the Boys and Girls Club, and you know, he's been, and I'll just go through a few things. He's an executive director for the last 10 years, and I hope he stays for another 10 years. He was a program director for 6 years. He's been a member since he was 6 years old. And we're having our 60th anniversary this year, and we're having a big, he showed me some pictures when he played on the Little League football team. I said, I didn't know you were that little at one time, Phil. He's a member of the KOK Mardi Gras group, which does a lot of fundraising. He's a member of the Green Valley Country Club. Of course, he's a weekend resident of the Wheel Hitchcock community. He also does local TV. I don't know if you've ever listened, sometimes they'll do little Friday night football games, and he's doing live TV football games. He does a great job. And it says here, he grills the best ribs ever. So I expect an invitation sometime, but I'm proud to know him. I go to the Boys and Girls Club quite a bit, being a board member, and he knows every kid in that group. There's 200 of them. He knows their parents. He knows if there's anything going on with them. I could just say Philip's amazing, and you deserve the support more than anybody I know. Thank you.
The presentation of a Paul Harris Fellow is the Rotary Foundation's way of expressing its appreciation for a substantial contribution to its humanitarian educational programs. This honor is named for Rotary's founder, Paul Harris, who started Rotary in 1905. In order to become a Paul Harris Fellow, a person must contribute $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation's annual fund, Polio Plus, or an approved foundation grant. Philip, it is because of gifts like yours that the Rotary Foundation is able to carry out an array of programs that achieve beneficial changes in our world, such as increased food production, better education, and wider availability of treatment and rehab for the sick and disabled, to name a few. In becoming a Paul Harris Fellow, Philip joins a remarkable company of persons throughout the world, all recognized for their devotion to the ideal of goodwill, peace, and understanding. Paul Harris said, "He who tries to find the good in others will be rewarded, for others will surely find the good in him. Of all the earth's sad and lonesome creatures, the most helpless is he who loves not his fellow man." Philip, at this time, Andy will present you with the Paul Harris Fellow certificate and pin. We congratulate you and we thank you for your commitment to the programs of the Rotary Foundation. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join me in recognizing Philip Kelly as the new Paul Harris Congrats, Phil. All right, and we also have a multiple Paul Harris Fellow today. Paul Harris Fellow recognition is a proud tradition that honors the memory of our founder, past Rotary International President Paul Harris. In order to be honored, as I mentioned before, someone gives $1,000 to the annual fund, Polio Plus, or approved foundation. The work is vital to the children, families, and communities who benefit. I'd like to hand this over to Melissa Kirkland, who is getting Paul Harris +1 today. Please stand. All right, we'll ask Melissa to come back up and introduce our guest for today.
Wow, I'm like shocked. Now I'm speechless. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I was thinking, who's that? So, but I do want to introduce our speaker for today. I'll find some words. Bryan Dawson, who's here with me. He's the founder of 1819 News. He began his career in media with USA Radio Networks, where he read big name news talk hosts such as Steve Dace and Rusty Humphreys, and most importantly, helped transform USA Radio's 5-minute top of the hour news product, designed solely for AM news talk stations, into shorter, well-produced,
newscast that appealed to FM music stations. The new news offering was a hit, and Bryan rapidly grew the news product to reach several hundred stations. From there, he went on to work with Lee Habib, the creator and co-founder of the Laura Ingraham Show. And on Lee's newest radio project, Our American Stories, Bryan took the evening daily storytelling radio show from 80 stations when he arrived to over 330 stations, and made a distribution deal with Premier Networks and iHeartRadio Media possible before moving on to start 1819 News. 1819 News is raising the bar for journalism in Alabama. Bryan lives in Wetumpka with his beautiful wife and 7 children. So that was so impressive to me. He knew everyone else's name and their age. So let me introduce to you Bryan Dawson.
Well, thank you guys for allowing me to come speak. I've spoken in quite a few civic groups, but I've not done the singing the national anthem in any of them. So you guys are doing really well with that. I enjoyed that thoroughly. So 1819 News is a statewide, state-focused news and multimedia company. We're designed to compete with AL.com, and hopefully, if we have it our way, that we'll take them out. So read from that what you may. But you know, the impetus in starting 1819 News has to do with something that Alabama does really, really well other than football. So Alabama is, I think, the 3rd or 4th most corrupt state in the nation when it comes to our politics. And so, you know, that, like I said, that and football, I'll take the football success, but the other thing, not so much. And so as we delved into this, this venture, I've had people that come up and ask me if I was crazy, why would I do this? You know, you hear the stories about the pushing back against gambling and the guy that was running for attorney general that ended up dead in Phoenix City, and stuff like that. And you know, it is, and we've already experienced a tremendous amount of pushback from kind of the powers that be. But I always tell them a story that really helped give me the courage to go down this path. And so I have a pastor friend named Scott Brown who lives in North Carolina, and his dad is a World War II vet that flew a P-51 Mustang fighter plane in Iwo Jima. And he was shot down in the Pacific Ocean, and he had anti-aircraft artillery rip through his plane, nearly missing him. And he crashed in the Pacific Ocean in enemy territory. And by the grace of God, he was picked up by Americans rather than Japanese. And he went back, got on a plane and kept going, right? And so kind of a different level of character back then, but he, that was his dad. When I met him, he was 92 years old, and I went to Scott's house, and I was there for 4 days. In the first 3 days, Bill Brown, the father, the World War II hero, didn't say anything to me, just kind of watched me. And then finally on that 4th day, I was looking at a model of the P-51 Mustang that he flew, and he was in a wheelchair that you have to have this little joystick to get around. And he rolled up kind of behind me and stuck up on me and startled me. And he said, "Bryan, I need to tell you something." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You know, there was a time when we did what was right, even if people shot bullets at us." He says, "Bryan, there's coming a time when you're going to have to stand up for what's right, even if people shoot bullets at you." I think, you know, unless you're living under a rock, you know that we're living in kind of tumultuous times right now, and it's going to require courage and people to stand up and expose things that are going on. And so that's our effort, that's our hope, that's what we're wanting to do. My media career history, as it said in the bulletin there, I started, can I take this out? Fantastic. All right, got it. Feel much better now. So I started my media career at USA Radio Networks, which is a network that existed in the 80s. It was really, really big under a guy named Marlon Maddox. He was not there when I was there, and it was kind of tanking. And they had a couple good news talk show hosts, 3-hour kind of conservative news talk shows. But what they had was a news product that I thought was really, really good, but it sounded like it had been produced on a Casio keyboard in the 80s, because it's probably produced on a Casio keyboard in the 80s. So I got a hold of that, and I had moved to Alabama about 8 years ago. When I started at USA Radio Networks, I didn't know the difference between a radio station or a radio network. I didn't know what I was doing, completely new to the industry. And I think being new to the industry is what allowed me to think outside the box and be successful. And so what I kind of discovered was, as I drove around Alabama, I would listen to the news, and the top of the hour newscast is you're driving down the road and you're you know, and then you hear the headline news. Well, I was driving around Alabama and I hear ABC News, CBS News, and those particular news outlets have a certain slant that isn't very appealing to most of the Alabamians that I met while I was down here. And so I went back to my team and said, hey, what if we shorten this up, put a better sounder on it, and offered it to country music stations across the Bible Belt? And they said, well, that's stupid, it'll never work. It's very encouraging. I said, well, I think it will. Why don't you give me a chance? And so they did, and I took that and got it on several hundred country music stations. And there's a thing about music stations versus AM news talk stations, which is where they were on previous. They have these things called human beings listening. And if you're in the media business, that's a big deal when you're trying to sell advertising. So it was a huge success, and I was discovered by a gentleman by the name of Lee Habib. After that success, Lee Habib created Laura Ingram's radio show back in 2001. He was wildly successful with that, and he kind of had the same type of supportive people around him that I did when I was doing the new stuff. They told him no one wanted to listen to a woman talk about politics. Turns out he was right, and everyone knows who Laura Ingram is. So he was wildly successful there with her, and then he went on to oversee Salem radio hosts such as Bill Bennett, Dennis Prager, Hugh Hewitt, Michael Medved, and many others, and he still does that to this day. But as he was successful at both of those places, he got to the point where he was, you know, sick of angry conservatives talking to other angry conservatives about how angry and conservative they are for 3 hours a day on the radio, and thought, why can't we do something better with this medium? And so he got the idea to start something like National Public Radio, and said, what would NPR sound like if it was done by people who love God and love their country? And that was an idea that he and Bill Bennett had. And so he got to work and created American Private Radio, which is a 501c3. That came from the idea that National Public Radio, in their brilliance, saw that you can create a content production and distribution platform that's connected to a foundation. Otherwise, you're stuck to as many ads as you can sell. That's as much money as you're going to have to put into the content. So the content can only be so good. Well, National Public Radio realized that if there's people that believe in what they're doing, they're going to support the work you're doing, and it's purpose driven. And so they kind of figured that out. And so Lee leaned on that and created American Private Radio with a show called Our American Stories that he was producing. And he reached out to me and said, hey, I want you to help me grow this show. And Our American Stories, the crux of that show was telling the story of America to Americans each and every night. And the idea of it was to celebrate what's good, true, and beautiful about our country, rather than every time you turn on the TV, it's people tearing down the country and what's so bad about it. Everyone's racist, everyone's stupid, and it's all the negativity. He wanted to celebrate the things that were good about our country. And so, and how he did that, you have to have a culturally relevant, engaging show. And NPR was really, really good about that. They hit people in the American middle and they moved them a certain direction, kind of on the worldview spectrum. And Lee wanted to really lean into getting people to love their country and doing that with content. And so he created a show where you would listen to Tom Petty, and it would be this incredible story about Tom Petty talking about growing up in Florida. You'd hear his music and you would just be super engaged in it. And then there'd be a transition where all of a sudden you were hearing the story of Thomas Jefferson and how he wrote the Declaration of Independence in just 2 weeks when he was 33 years old. It's pretty amazing. Not only that, when he signed the Declaration of Independence, he was essentially signing his own death warrant, but did it anyway. And so all of a sudden civics class became a lot more interesting. And so I got to learn from him. He's a brilliant guy, media mogul, if you will. And so my deal with him was, okay, Lee, I'll help you grow this Our American Story show, but I need you to teach me everything you know about the industry. And he said, okay, deal. You grow my show, I teach you everything I know. And so he was on 80 radio stations when I got there. I took him from 80 stations to 330 stations, big stations like WSB in Atlanta, WHO in Des Moines, KBC in Los Angeles, and many others. And so it exploded. And staying true to his part of the bargain, he taught me. I got to sit at his feet for 4.5 years, learning all about the media industry, sales, fundraising, all of it, cultural architecture, just all kinds of things from him. And so he taught me, and in that 4.5 year period, I learned a ton. And then, we went on to do a deal with Premiere and iHeart, which, again, some of you guys may know what that means, others not, but I'm sure you've heard of iHeartRadio. They're the biggest content production distribution station owning group in the world. And so when you start playing T-ball, you want to play for the Braves, but it usually doesn't happen. When you start a radio show, the goal is for Premiere and iHeart to pick it up, but it doesn't usually happen. But we were able to take this show and get it picked up by Premiere and iHeart. And that was a really, really big deal. So we did that. The timing of that was around end of 2020, in that time space. I spent the last few months of 2020, I'd say from July to November, working with a group to try and do a massive get out the vote effort to increase voter turnout in the 2020 election. And my whole background up to that point had been national politics, national public policy, national fundraising, national media, national everything. And that election, by the end of it, I just came to the point where, DC was such a mess. I just became convicted that, we can't fix Washington, DC. Doesn't mean we shouldn't send good people there, but that couldn't be the focus. This isn't the winning strategy. And I went to church shortly after that, and my pastor started preaching on localism. Fathers need to fix their families. Families need to be in churches. Churches need to be in the community. Communities are part of cities. Cities are part of counties. Counties, make up the state. This is the winning strategy. And so I was convicted by that. And I went home and prayed with my wife and said, okay, how can I use my gifts, talents, abilities, resources, and relationships I've developed in this industry to do something for my people in place here in Alabama? And a week after that, I got a call from Caleb Crosby, the president of the Alabama Policy Institute. One of their guys was getting a radio show in Huntsville, and he had some questions for me about that radio show. And as we began to talk about radio, he said, what we really need more than a radio show in Huntsville is a statewide, state-focused news outlet that's really exposing the corruption that's going on in Montgomery that can compete with AL.com. And I happened to be becoming a free agent right as that's going on, right as I was praying about what do I do, and boom, this hits me. And so we sat down together and he said, all right, well, let's write up a mission, vision, plan, budget. I wrote up the mission, vision, plan, budget. This is how we're going to do it. This is what needs to be done. And we got to work, and it's been miraculous to see. It was an idea about February 2021. I started full-time in July of 2021. We started publishing October 18th of 2021. So we haven't been publishing for a year, and we've already exploded across the state. We've gotten really big in Birmingham and Montgomery, and we're really trying to make inroads down here in the Wiregrass area, because we're an outlet for all Alabamians, not just big cities. Because I think the way that we do things reflects all of Alabama. So, one of the things that we really want to focus on, and I guess the problems that we identified why we needed a news outlet that was different than AL.com. I break it down into, on one hand, you have an outlet that's shaming the people of Alabama. Then on the other hand, you have outlets that are shielding the people of Alabama from the truth. And so on this hand, you have AL.com that's, to me, and I may offend some people, I hope I don't, is a constant outlet that's saying, good, dirty rednecks, you better barely clean your guns and Bibles and all this other stuff, and it doesn't really reflect the state. And then on this hand, you have other groups that are essentially running PR for a lot of the people that are causing problems in Montgomery, that are special interests and really lobbying arms, and they're doing PR for them. So you got this group has their media outlet, the lobbyists have their media outlet, but the people of Alabama didn't have a media outlet. And so we wanted to fill that gap and thought there was fertile ground to do it, and we were right. And so I would say one of the problems that we have is that, not to get political, but Alabama is a Republican supermajority. And what that means is that there's no Democrat party that can challenge the Republicans, and there's no media outlet holding them accountable. So what that means is that it's unchecked, and unchecked power, whether Republican or Democrat, is bad for the people. And so we wanted to be something that put a check on our government, and so that we can expose the things that are going on, because we're in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama. And the only way we can do that is when we have a government that reflects the people. Alabama has some of the most incredible people in the country here, but our legislators don't really reflect us as a whole, and we think that's problematic. So We've had a lot of really big, impactful stories that have made a difference as far as from an investigative point of view. We're doing daily content that's letting the people of Alabama know what's going on all over the state. But one of the other things that I got from Lee that we really like to do is that we don't want to just talk about the things that are bad in Alabama. There's enough of that. Every time you turn on the TV, if there's a depiction of someone from Alabama, it's a toothless redneck with a trucker hat. And we don't think that that's an accurate depiction of Alabama. So we want to tell stories that are good, true, and beautiful about Alabama, about ministries, businesses, job creators, sports heroes, whatever, so that the people of Alabama can be proud of where they live rather than being constantly told that they should be ashamed of their way of life. So, you know, I'm not sure how long do I have to speak. I want to make sure I'm not rolling past any deadlines. Good. Okay. So, ultimately, our goal, we want to move from where we are now into, we'll soon be crowdsourcing. People always ask, where does, how do you guys make money? What are you doing? We're a nonprofit. We're a 501c3. We raise philanthropic capital to get off the ground. And then we're going to be moving into a crowdsourcing model where people are supporting the work we're doing. They'll go on the website and see, oh, look, we'll join the 1819 Club for $18.19 a month. We'll get you a t-shirt, bumper sticker, coffee mug, whatever. And support that way. We'll also do advertising, and we'll continue to have philanthropic support. And so, not really knowing how long I had to talk, I want to kind of go into what I think is an important closing note. And that's on our website. If you go to 1819news.com, right in the center, it says rise to the moment of truth. Throughout history, we look back on people and we laud them in here as heroes, just like the gentleman I started this out with talking about, Bill Brown. He was a hero. We look at the people who stormed the beaches of Normandy, and these people were heroes. You can picture those boats backing up, the Higgins boats and the tailgates with bullets ricocheting off of them as those tailgates dropped and the bullets began to rip people apart. And each person that was in those boats took a step forward and did what was required of them. They rose to their moment, right? And we look at them and we look back on them in the time that they lived, and they rose to the moment that God put before them, and they were faithful, and we honor them for it. I think we're living in a time period right now where it's incumbent upon us to rise to our moment. It looks different for each different person. My response was to create a media outlet that shared the truth of what's going on. But I think throughout history, it's ordinary people that rise to extraordinary circumstances just by being faithful with what's put in front of them. And I think we want to provide the people of Alabama with the information for them to be able to do that. And so that's what I got. Sure. Take questions.
How many radio stations are you on in Alabama right now?
So we're an online written publication. So we would be like an online newspaper. And so we work with radio stations. And so I go on the radio in Montgomery for 3 hours with Joey Clark on News Talk 93.1 every Friday. And we talk about the stories that we're publishing. And so one of the partnerships that we have with radio stations is, there wasn't a lot of news that was actually talking about what was actually going on. And so they didn't really know. Well, now we're supplying a lot of these radio stations, local radio stations, with information that they can actually talk about and really dig into. So we will have a radio news offering very similar to what I was talking about with USA Radio Networks that we offer radio stations, but that hasn't been released quite yet. Yes, sir.
What do you consider your most impactful story that you have broken since you started up in Alabama?
That's a tough one because there's been a bunch. I would probably say we shed light on the gambling stuff. I think when a lot of people in Alabama, they don't know the depths of the problems there. They think, well, why shouldn't we have it? Scratch tickets, this, that, and the other. The problem is the legislation that gets proposed for gambling is that ultimately they're trying to enshrine these people who've been operating these casinos illegally in the state for the last 20 or 30 years. They're trying to enshrine those people into the Alabama state constitution to give them the right to run these casinos exclusively, so no competition. They're being hand selected and giving the ability to run full-fledged gambling casinos without competition and enshrining them into the Alabama State Constitution in perpetuity. And so that's bad in all kinds of ways. And so even if you're pro gambling, I don't think anybody's pro government picking winners and losers. And so shining light on that was, I think, really, really big, and exposing that, because that's not what you hear on the TV. That's not the commercials you see. You see, oh, look, in Tennessee, Becky got to go to college because of the scratch tickets. We want Becky to go to college here. Why don't we have scratch tickets? Well, the scratch tickets are always connected to the gambling, and then the gambling is what I just described. So the people knowing and having the information allows them to be able to pressure their legislators to do, what they really want done. If the people don't know what's going on, they can't call their legislators and tell them what to do, if that makes sense. I think the other one that was really impactful is the Alabama Education Association used to run the state. And it was it was not a good time in Alabama. And the AEA ran the state under Paul Hubbard, and they were probably the most powerful organization in the state. In 2010, when Governor Riley came in, they kind of died, and everyone thought they kind of went away. But what ended up happening is that they have now kind of pretended to go away, but what they really did is now they are putting tons and tons of money into Republican coffers when it says in the Republican bylaws that you're not supposed to take money from the AEA or the NEA, and they're doing it anyway. And so we expose the fact that the AEA is paying off Republican legislators with, up to, I think, like $1.68 million. And so, again, I'm not saying whether that's good or that's bad, but I think the people of Alabama should know about it. Anybody else?
I just wonder about the proof of comments that are made through the news media, what you just said about AEA and so forth. I'm an AEA member, and I understand that we do draw criticism for supporting certain individuals. But it also bothers me that news media can make open claims, sending them without any justification of right or wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would be terrible if there was a news outlet that did that. But I think what I've seen is, basically listing, this legislator, this legislator, this legislator, this legislator took $10,000, $10,000, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $160,000 from the AEA. And then with that, we show that the Republican Party bylaws say that they're not supposed to do that. And again, so I don't have a feeling one way or another as a news outlet, but I think the people of Alabama should know that that happened. That's all I'm saying.
So Brian, on your, you had mentioned that this news media method is exploding across Alabama, and you said Birmingham and Montgomery. What are kind of the numbers of that? How do you gauge that since you're not on radio? I guess you have subscribers to your website. Maybe is there a podcast or anything that you're seeing?
Yeah.
Growth in numbers and a appetite for this type of thing?
Absolutely. So primarily, first and foremost, we're an online written publication. So we're basically a digital newspaper, right? But with that, we also have digital podcasts that we're doing as well. The newspaper, our goal by July 1st was to be able to have 200,000 page views. We've now hit 400,000 page views, and we're now just in October. So we're way past where we thought we would be. As far as social media goes, we're not putting a lot of effort into expanding our social media reach, because social media can censor you or drop you or cut you off at the heels with no warning or anything else. So we're doing very, very well on social media, but that's not what we would call a key performance indicator that we're focused on. Our newsletter subscriber is the biggest thing that we're focused on, because it's an email, and that email comes from us to our subscribers. If you go to 1819news.com, there's a red button that says subscribe. We don't sell your information. We're not asking for any money. You put your email address in there, you'll get the newsletter every single day. At about 5:30 in the morning, it comes in your inbox. It has all the stories that matter, all the opinions of our opinion writers, and then all the podcasts. One of the other things that's really important about what we're doing is our news is news, and it's listed news. It says news. That's the who, what, when, where, just the facts, man. The opinion is opinion writers giving their opinion, and they're clearly marked what they are. And on one of the things in journalism that really drives me crazy is opinion being presented as news. And I think that would be problematic. So we want to clearly mark those things. But our email newsletter subscribers, our goal by July 1st was to get to 5,000. We're at 15,000. So, we're a couple months past that mark and we're already at triple what we wanted to be. So from that regard, and then a lot of anecdotal stuff, which is I go places and people, sing the praises of what we're doing. They're super grateful for the work that we're doing. And so again, that's anecdotal, it's not measurable, but it's definitely interesting to not even be a year old and to get, be walking down the road and people stop me and say, hey, aren't you the 1819 news guy? Yeah. So that would be one way. Yes, sir.
How many content providers do you have and where do they come from?
As far as like reporters? Yeah, so we have an executive editor and a managing editor. So we have an editorial staff, and we have an editor at large that does more reporting than editing, but she's still there to help with editing. And we have 5 reporters, and then we have an investigative journalist. And then we're continuing to add to our number so we get to where we really feel like we're covering the state well. You got a guy named Caleb Taylor that's covering the Wiregrass for us. So there's an actual person who has a Wiregrass beat that's reporting on the stuff that's going on down here, so that's in the conversation of statewide news.
I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
To Lester's comment, how do you, as a news organization, a small news organization, with a small number of writers and editors contributing, how do you ensure that you fact check it and that you are not putting out false information, or that you don't have a tainted writer potentially on there that does have a view that he wants to portray to his audience?
I think the biggest thing there is exactly what you said, is the fact you have editors. I mean, a lot of these digital publications. So what happened in newspapers is when it wasn't that news went digital, it's the car advertising and mortgage or house, sale of homes and sale of cars went digital. And that was the revenue stream for newspapers. And so they became not profitable. They started to tank. Everything moved over to online. And standards for journalism went down. They just did. And so a lot of websites, reporters just slap up the article, and if someone has a problem with it, they go back and edit it later. And so we have 2 copy editors that I didn't mention. So we have 2 copy editors looking at it to make sure the copy's well, but if they spot something that looks fishy, they flag it. Then we have an editor at large, a managing editor, and then an executive editor. There's not very many publications, especially our size, that have that kind of an editorial staff, and it's for that specific reason, is to make sure that doesn't happen. And no one's perfect, and if something does happen, and we've got email addresses in every single article that says, commentary at 1819 News or editor at 1819 News, and you send us, hey, this doesn't look right, we're happy to dig through it and look again. But ideally, we're presenting the evidence that we have, or we're substantiating any claims with the evidence that would be in that article. It should be pretty clear again. So my biggest thing is, you don't know until you know. And I would just encourage you guys to get on 1819news.com and watch and read it and look for it and see for yourself. You guys will be pleasantly surprised. Yes, ma'am.
Is all of your staff from Alabama?
We've got one guy who's moving here from Arkansas, but he'll be living in Alabama. And to some degree, if you know anything about Alabama politics, it's good to have some people that aren't caught up in the middle of it. He's going to be our investigative journalist. And so thought it would be good to bring him in so he doesn't know anybody and he can look at just the facts, not be swayed by friendships or anything like that. But yeah, the rest of them live in Alabama. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bryan, for being with us today. Very informative program. I wanted to say thanks to Allen Register for visiting with us today. Great to have you. Thank you to those that helped with their time today, making the program possible. Robbie Thomas, Dr. Freak, Lawrence Johnson, Terry Duffy, and Catherine Melee. And we won't be meeting next week due to Columbus Day. So we will see you guys the following Monday. If you will, please stand to recite the 4-way test. of the things we think, say, or do. Have a great week.